Welcome to this edition of the Grow Route here on Fantasy Focus, brought to you by the Original Hooters. I'm Derek Tate. That's Jay Pfeiffer, as we are going to break down a multitude of NFL topics. Here on July 19th, we are nearing NFL training camps, supposedly beginning to report, but
hopefully,
knock on wood, that's actually going to happen. But, Jay Pfeiffer, want to always start it off with how are things going there in the Windy City, baby?
Pretty good here, man. It's starting to warm back up again. We had some storms roll through earlier this morning and last night. A little humid, a little warm, but it's July 19th, so can't complain too much. How are things up there in Michigan, buddy?
Well, you know it, man. We're starting to pick back up as far as sports go. I'm a sports anchor over at Newsnet. Things are looking good, but we've got some concerns that we got to talk about when it comes to the National Football League. So we're going to talk about, look, the deadline came and went for players like Dak Prescott, Myles Garrett, other franchised players hit with that tag to either sign or look for a long-term extension deal. Some happened, some didn't. We'll talk about those. NFL safety protocols seem to be the topic of discussion as teams are hopefully reporting to training camp within the next, 10 to 15 days or so.
Yep.
We'll go ahead and talk about some of those ones that recently were proposed, and we'll talk about what we think about them. But we got to start with the Washington NFL franchise. And I'm removing the Redskins moniker because the Washington Redskins are removing said Redskins moniker, logo, name that they've been associated with for over 80 years now. But really, as according to reports from the Washington Post, there are 15 former employees accusing or making accusations in regards to sexual harassment, which, from an NFL franchise, that there was some sort of debacle when it comes to cheerleaders and taking their passports and holding those while they were, reportedly having to do a photo shoot of some sort. I don't want to get to the details of it because it's very concerning. But, you look at the long slew of controversial issues when it comes to this Washington franchise and owner Dan Snyder in particular, and in particular his stance, man, as far as saying we will, quote unquote, never change the name of the Washington Redskins. And of course, now they have denounced that name. They are going to be, retiring that moniker moving forward. So, I got to ask you, man. I know it's not apples to oranges necessarily for someone like an owner of the Los Angeles Clippers like Donald Sterling, but dude, Dan Snyder has made some pretty questionable decisions over the last 10 years, man. What do you think about the Washington franchise, Dan Snyder in particular? Kind of sound off about your thoughts about some of the recent developments.
Yeah. And definitely this is something that has been long overdue within the NFL circles.
Right.
The moniker of the Washington team I will no longer use as well. And it was honestly something that I had to get educated on, Derek, within the past, 5 to 10 years or so. Because this topic has been cyclical in a lot of ways, right? Every few years or so, changing this team name has been brought up in some way, shape, or form. And the NFL in its truest form has found ways to not make it as big a deal as it should have been. The Washington nickname, the moniker, is completely a racist and derogatory name to Native American people, and it actually doesn't. It is a reference to the supposed skin color, but it's also a reference to scalping. And I don't know if you knew this, Derek.
Yes.
But it's and for people who aren't educated and don't know what scalping is, and the practice use of it, rampant use of it back in the day, I just would advise you to look it up and Google it.
Yeah.
I won't get into it right now, but
it's removal of hair.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
Yep. And again, it's that term is a reference to that more so than the actual Native American people. And again, this is something I didn't even myself know. I had to educate myself on this within the past about decade or so. But to get back to the team and Daniel Snyder, listen, we both know he is a reprehensible owner. It's on a sort of Donald Sterling level as far as it being tone deaf and being arrogant and ignorant to your fan base and the
cultures. I mean,
to culture. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of sort of the phrase I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know this, Derek, and most football fans sort of know this, but whenever this story would be brought up, Dan Snyder would try to bring up some redacted, outdated survey poll that says most Native American people approved of this nickname, which is absolutely not true. First of all, it wasn't based in any sort of fact, and you've had that controversy swirling around the team. Now you have this story, published by the Washington Post, who does a great job. I mean, they've been in the middle of every
credible source. Yes.
I mean, it is probably the credible source when it comes to just not only football but political stories and that sort of thing as well. But it's a great story detailing years and years of abuse to female staffers, cheerleaders. And
it goes higher level shit too, man. I mean, it goes like play-by-play announcer, like senior VPs and shit like that. It's crazy,
I believe trainers on the actual Washington staff. I don't think Daniel Snyder specifically is named, but I believe somebody close to him is. I'd have to go back and reference.
He knows of it. He has.
Sure. Oh yeah. This is not a if he knew or did not know sort of thing for me. I mean, you're
owner of the franchise. He definitely has some sort of knowledge of it.
Agreed. And will he be forced to sell after something like this? I don't know. That's sort of the point I was trying to get to when we're talking about this whole thing. But again, he is a reprehensible figure, and he vows a culture change and things of that nature. But personally, between me and you, Derek, again, this guy has been arrogant, ignorant, and tone deaf throughout his tenure as owner of the Washington franchise. And the NFL, we were talking about this right before we started the show. It's reactive instead of proactive. I don't know if they're really going to do anything to really punish him. But, to bring this sort of full circle, I am glad that something is finally being done about the name change. One small step for man, to use an old cliche there. But that was something that has been long overdue. And, it remains to be seen because we all know how much of a POS Dan Snyder is. But I'll give the floor to you just to sort of get your thoughts on the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about, so when I look at Dan Snyder, man, and certainly there are challenges when it comes to owning any business, and certainly one of the magnitude of like an NFL franchise, right? And you do have a lot of history. I mean, like there is certainly a fan base that I'm trying to play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
Like here's the thing, man. I mean, ultimately, if today's day and age there was going to be an expansion NFL franchise, right, and they come up with an avatar that is either like a white-skinned male or female or black-skinned male or female, do you think that you can get away with naming the team white-skins or black-skins? The answer is absolutely hell to the no. Period. It's awful. Even if you watch old like cowboy movies and stuff like that, old westerns and stuff like there are multiple times where the name Redskins is used in a derogatory term to refer to Native Americans. And I've got Native American blood, man. So, I mean, I'm by no means am I an expert on the matter. I'm not trying to pretend like I am, but what I'm trying to give as perspective is that Dan Snyder, when this was brought to his attention, had the opportunity to make the right decision, to be proactive. Like, look, man, we are bringing this to your attention. We are letting you know that this name is not really cool. Like, it's offensive to a certain extent. And we're in the 21st century. Like, can we change the mascot of a national football team?
Yeah.
I mean, and Dan Snyder went the defensive route, man. And a lot of times when people get defensive, it's because they feel entitled to be defensive. Like, it's just like, dude, no, you can't question me on this shit. We're fine. We're not being racist. Like, dude, Dan Snyder, you're not a member of the Native American community. And even if you don't speak for the entire Native American community, man. I mean, it's like, and you did some whack ass, survey saying, oh, well, Native Americans aren't offended by this. You didn't. exactly poll every Native American in the United States of America, which, by the way, is a disenfranchised, group of people here in the United States. That's based in unfortunately, man, it's like this tragic part of our country's history is how we treated the Native Americans.
Yep.
So I look at it like Dan Snyder had the opportunity to do the right thing, and the man has decided to go in the opposite direction until Pepsi, until FedEx, until Nike decided
money.
Look, man, money. We are not going to sell your merchandise anymore. So guess what? It's going to affect your bottom line. And then when it affects the bottom line, Dan Snyder decides to have a change of heart. So that to me means anything that comes out of his mouth doesn't mean jack shit.
Yeah, I mean, money talks and bullshit walks, apparently. And it's sad and it's unfortunate, but it's the truth when it comes to how things are operated in this country. And I'm with you. I echo your sentiment, Derek. When anything that Daniel Snyder says from this point forward is just hollow, and it falls on deaf ears for this guy.
I didn't mean to rant there. I know that was.
No, rant away, my friend. This is what we do here on the Go Route.
Dan Snyder, man, Dan Snyder's rubbed me the wrong way for a long time, and now. But here's the thing now too, and we've seen the NFL mishandle domestic violence. We've seen them mishandle things of that nature, and I'm certainly not laughing. I'm almost the only reason I snickered.
It's comical though.
Well, it's exactly because of how they have handled moments of or issues of domestic violence in the past. Like, I mean, now you have 15 former employees of the Washington franchise coming forward and saying, look, there were moments of with this person, this high-ranking executive that, there were significant wrongdoings. Yep. And is it a cover-up? Is it something where this NFL franchise, Dan Snyder, decided to go he knows about this? You cannot convince me, no shot in hell, that an NFL owner doesn't know about things like this. It's not just handled by the
HR department,
Department of Communications, the head of the communications, director of communications. Dude, if another human being in your NFL franchise where domestic violence has been definitely a significant topic, and it should be, you can't tell me that if allegations like this came forward and were brought to specific people's attention in the Washington franchise, that it didn't bubble up to Dan Snyder.
Yeah, and going on for years. Again, this to reference this report, this is not something that has just happened. This has happened and had been happening for years and years and years,
right,
on multiple occasions. And again, I'm going to read the story, word for word, but we're talking about over a decade here, roughly 11, 12 years of allegations of abuse and mistreatment. And again, I can't find the name now, but I don't think Snyder's specifically mentioned, but I said this before.
He was not.
There's somebody really close to him that has been mentioned.
Richard Mann,
right? Okay,
was brought up. There was another high-ranking executive that was also brought up. That in the report from the Washington Post, it's not we're not throwing stones here and just naming random people. This is documented. And when this is documented, and damn well this is not the first time Daniel Snyder has heard about this shit. That's crap.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to something I mentioned last week about the Shield and how the league operates. If anything that's effectively going to affect the bottom line of your franchise, of your league, it's something that the NFL has had no problem sweeping under the rug. Again, when you talk about domestic violence, when we talk about
Rice comes to mind.
Yep, Ray Rice, obviously. If there was no video on that situation,
he would have got a 2-week suspension.
Yep. Or may not have even gotten suspended at all, Derek. May not have even gotten suspended at all. He might even still be in the league. I know that's probably we're maybe talking 6, 7, 8 years ago at this point, so maybe not. I'm going back to running backs, but he might still be in the league. And this is what we're talking about here when it comes to the NFL and how it handles very serious situations. They're more often than not swept under the rug And it takes some damn fine reporting, like the people at the Washington Post, or a viral video, a la George Floyd, a la Ray Rice. It takes an incident to happen for these things to be brought to light, and that's what's really the shame here.
So when it comes to, in particular, the issue of domestic violence, I mean, we saw when it comes to or sexual harassment or whatever. Look, women are in sports, and they damn well should be in sports. There are so many women that do a fantastic job with regards to work in the National Football League.
Yep.
And for employees to have significant allegations that are probably brought to their, person that's above them or high-ranking attention, and for nothing to be done or to be egregiously mishandled is just something that the NFL seems to be on the wrong side of far too often. And in particular, man, like you were spot on when it comes to Ray Rice, man. Ray Rice was transparent with his meeting with the National Football League to discuss the incident on the TMZ video where he was basically dragging an unconscious carcass, which was his significant other, out of an elevator, and she was knocked out cold, unconscious. And Ray Rice was transparent, and they gave him a 2-week suspension. And then when the TMZ video leaked as far as the elevator footage,
right,
that's when the National Football League said, oh, well, okay, well, he's on the commissioner's exempt list. Far too often, man, the National Football League is just so off the mark when it comes to these issues. And I personally want to call to action. The NBA did a fantastic job with Donald Sterling. And if you are unfamiliar with the circumstances, the NBA, of course, is not the NFL, and we talk about the go route we talk about NFL topics. But when we talk about Donald Sterling and the conversations that were brought to light about his racist views, I'm calling it racist views.
That's what they were.
That's exactly what they were. And this man is an NBA owner. Adam Silver wasn't having that shit, and he ended up having to sell the franchise. I think that something should be done about Dan Snyder. How can you sit there and let this man own one of your 32 teams in the National Football League, and one that has a storied history of systemic racism? They were the last team to sign an African-American player. I mean, I'm not saying that he was part of that. He wasn't a part of that, but I'm just saying, like, if you want to send a message, then send a message. Get him out of there.
Yeah, and this is again, we're talking about two different sports here. But the thing about the NFL, and again, this is I don't know how it can be done, because although the structure of these two leagues are similar, the owners of the NFL hold so much more weight and power than the owners of the NBA do. You needed, I'm forgetting the numbers here, but you needed a certain amount of the owners to sign off on the Donald Sterling incident. Because technically the commissioner, he works for the owners. Correct. And it's the same way in the NFL.
It's similar in the National Football League, right?
Right. So with the NFL being, and I'm going to reference it again, the good old boys league, and I know you know what I'm talking about when I say that, Derek.
Yep.
It'll be much more difficult, at least in my opinion, for something like that to happen in the case of Dan Snyder. And again, we applaud what Silver did with the NBA. Excuse me, I'm mixing up his name. But to parallel this with Roger Goodell, we know Roger Goodell is not that type of guy anyway. He is not the guy to force the issue. Right. Most of the commissioners in the NFL's history, again, we're using this term repeatedly, but it's important. Most of the commissioners in the NFL have been reactive instead of proactive. And Roger Goodell is just another in a long line of commissioners like that. So
he's the mouthpiece of all the owners.
Exactly. So until we get an active commissioner that has a set of cojones on him to really stand up against some of this stuff, we're unfortunately going to continue to see it.
So when we talk about the NFL and their reactive nature, I mean, we don't have enough time in a day.
No.
24 hours ain't enough to be able to discuss all that shit. But I will say that, like, when you look at even Roger Goodell and how he's handled the situation, as far as now, like, all of a sudden they're open to having a black anthem. They are open to having far more. They're trying to act as if they are open to the systemic racism conversation now. And granted, I mean, like, I know that Donald Trump has President Donald Trump, U.S. President Donald Trump, has came out and criticized Roger Goodell as far as, kneeling for the national anthem and his stance on that recently. But I mean, you had one player in Colin Kaepernick, and you could say what you want about Colin Kaepernick. I'm not saying that I've agreed with every single thing that man has done. I'm not saying that. But I will say that he peacefully protested. He took a knee during the national anthem, which is well within the U.S. constitutional rights to be able to bring attention to something he didn't agree with. And a lot of it was made about, always kneeling and disrespecting, veterans and stuff of that nature. If that's where you stand, that's fine.
Right.
But I will go ahead and say that, Colin Kaepernick got blackballed by NFL owners like the boys league that you talk about now. I mean, yep. There is no reason this man should not have had a job in 2017, 2018, and whatever. You can make your case if he's deteriorating as a physical quarterback. That's fine.
Right.
He should have had a job at some point after his tenure with the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, and again, this is that Colin Kaepernick situation really rubbed me the wrong way in a lot of ways, because we're talking about, at one point, Colin Kaepernick was an MVP candidate. He's your starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers franchise in the Super Bowl. And, he's probably an errant throw away from maybe making another appearance in a Super Bowl. And I go back to that Seattle playoff game. I won't go there, but that breaks some 49ers fans' hearts. But there's no way. Yeah, exactly. There is no way a guy with that talent should have been ousted from the league the way he was. And they've announced in recent weeks that there's going to be a docu-series on Colin Kaepernick. Is going to talk about some of that. Hopefully, we can maybe get a little bit of behind the scenes, maybe some more of the inside story of how that situation unfolded. And I also agree with you, Derek. I don't agree 100% with some of the things that Kaepernick did. Mostly his comments about some things after the fact.
Right.
But that's fine. I can disagree with him and still wholeheartedly agree for his premise and what he wanted to do in the first place.
And show some respect for what he did in the first place.
Exactly. But it also, and again, this is obviously not the same situation, but I draw some parallels to the Cam Newton situation here, because again, different situations, right? But Cam Newton, MVP of the league, right? Super Bowl appearance quarterback, okay? A franchise quarterback, right? One of the most talented players to come in this league within the past 20 to 25 years. A little bit mercurial, sure. A little bit of an attitude problem, sure. But he's essentially ousted for a good amount of time for the league for essentially no reason. And you see this happening with quarterbacks of color. And you don't see this happening as much with white quarterbacks. And I'm just making a frank statement here.
You look at Cam's contract.
I was just going to go there.
It's awful.
Yep. 1 year deal. I think it's only $9 million.
Up to $7.5 million.
Right.
Incentive laden.
Meanwhile, you've got, and again, I'm not trying to throw shade at a guy like this, but you've got the quarterback in LA making $115 million. Are they the same type of quarterback? I don't know. I mean, is he a good quarterback? Sure he is. But again, these are situations that make you open your eyes when you're talking about the NFL dealing with prominent players of color. And it's very sad. And again, that goes back to somewhat of this systemic racism that permeates this league, Derek.
Well, I think when it comes to systemic racism, I don't know if I necessarily look at it like that from the quarterback position, because we've seen, look, man, I mean, I would say if you were to name the top 7 quarterbacks in the National Football League right now, most of them are African American.
Yeah, sure.
Most of them are black. And that's awesome because, dude, the game has changed. The game is constantly evolving. And we see someone like Patrick Mahomes isn't known as a mobile quarterback, but the dude can run. Trust me. Yeah. If he wants to tuck that sucker down and run, he can. Russell Wilson, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks of all time, in my humble opinion. Then you look at Lamar Jackson. Dude, Lamar Jackson's setting the league on damn fire. By the way, his Madden ratings, I take precedent. I take it. The dude got a 94.
Let's get into it. We can get into it. We got some time here.
He is the reigning league MVP. He is the cover athlete of Madden 21. And yet that man is a 94 overall. But Rob Gronkowski, a tight end, who hasn't played a down season and had one of his statistical worst seasons in his entire career in 2018 is a 95.
Yeah, I don't.
Are you shitting me? Like
I can't justify that one either, Derek. But
that pisses me off actually. But point being.
Yeah,
we're talking about Russell Wilson. We're talking about Patrick Mahomes. We're talking about Lamar Jackson. We're talking about Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
We're talking about Dak Prescott. Like, I think it's an easy argument to make that, dude, of the top 10 quarterbacks in the National Football League right now, 5 of them at minimum are black.
Yep.
Like, so what's the point I'm getting at here? The point is that I think that the systemic racism more so has to do in the National Football League with coaches of color, executives of color.
Yeah.
I mean, how many black head coaches are there in the NFL?
Yeah. What, 2? Flores in Miami, Anthony Lynn in LA.
Mike Tomlin,
right. 3?
Not many.
Yeah.
Not enough. Not nearly enough. And then not to mention, we've talked about this too. Like, they try to amend the Rooney rule. Dude, you can't, like, to me, it's offensive.
Yeah.
Like, to incentivize
something you should have been doing in the first place.
Like, something you should be doing in the first place, but also, like, dude, like, we're not trying to, like, reward owners for hiring black coaches that are the best candidates. Like, dude, they should be selected because they are the best freaking candidates, period. Like, not because you get like an extra draft pick or some stupid shit like that. I mean, like, again, I'm not African, I'm not black, man. But it pisses me off because it's like, that is so devoid of logic and like, that to me is offensive. Like, just like, why would you have to like incentivize an NFL franchise to hire a black GM or a black head coach? That doesn't make sense to me, dude. They're the best candidates anyway if you actually properly vet those. Joe Judge, no offense to him. I'm sure he's paid his dues. I'm sure he's like knows more about football than I'll ever forget. And I love football. But the dude was the wide receiver coach for one of the least productive wide receiver groups in the National Football League, and he's the head coach of the New York Giants.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, listen, we can talk about this till the cows come home, but these are things that have been happening, for years and years, and it's a spit in the face, it's a kick in the gut when you have these, quote unquote amendments to Rooney rules and things like that, because we should have been getting these jobs on merit anyway.
Incentivizing that just makes it that much worse. I mean, like, that just makes me go, what the really? That's your best. Of all the smart people that probably work at the National Football League, that's your best solution?
Yep. Agreed. So you said a key word. No, you're good. You said a key word though, and you're talking about incentives. And let's shift that to another player that just recently got a whole lot of incentives. Of course, I am talking about Mr. Myles Garrett, defensive end for the Cleveland Browns. And once again, I've got to give a big old cha-ching to Mr. Myles Garrett. He had gotten paid Let's see. The deal is worth up to $125 million, $50 million guaranteed. Signing for the star pass rusher of the Cleveland Browns, Mr. Myles Garrett. So, Derek, give me your reaction on the re-up.
I will gladly give you my reaction. So, when you have a NFL franchise that has been cloaked in failure for well over a decade now, and for many would argue much longer.
I was going to say, yeah, probably 2 or 3 decades.
Much longer in some cases, but at least for the last decade, as far as the sample size that we're going by. Myles Garrett, there's undoubtedly his production on the football field, which he has lived up to the number 1 overall pick of the 2017 NFL draft. And that's high expectations. And I applaud him for being able to make that transition from college to the National Football League and live up to those lofty expectations. Again, I'm not shitting on Myles Garrett here, but I will say this. Not only did he have a ton of 15-yard personal foul penalties to his name, but last year when the 6th seed in the AFC playoffs was fully up for grabs, and they were still in the running for it. In I think it was like their 10th game of the season.
Yep.
Myles Garrett, made a decision on the football field. Regardless, I don't know what was said between him and Mason Rudolph. There's conflicting reports and certainly some disturbing things that Mason Rudolph allegedly said. He tried to get under Myles Garrett's skin. Maybe he did. And then again, that's a nasty word if that is the exact word that Mason Rudolph used. And it would trigger any human being. I will say this, though. If Myles Garrett didn't rip off Mason Rudolph's helmet and then bash him over the head with it, could the Cleveland Browns have snuck into the playoffs with the 6th seed? Because Myles Garrett is that type of difference maker as far as an edge pass rusher, undoubtedly.
Yeah, I agree. And for a Cleveland defense that had been steadily improving the past couple of seasons, of course, with the emergence of Myles Garrett helping with that, it's definitely a possibility. I probably would have said the onus probably would have fallen more on the throwing arm or Baker Mayfield. But I agree. Listen, I agree because that Cleveland Browns defense is hellacious and it is that good.
Talent.
And barring any serious injuries, they've got playmakers at all 3 levels on that defense. So they're going to be pretty good again this upcoming season, again, assuming we have one. But
right.
But no, I agree with you. And you hit on a great point. It's something that I wanted to reference as well. He is a player that I know you're going to know this phrase too. And most of us, most of people listening and tuning in will know this phrase as well. But Myles Garrett plays on the edge as being an edge rusher, but he plays on the edge as well. Some refer to it as playing a second past the whistle, right? I know you've heard that phrase before.
Yep.
And again, this was a knock on him coming out of college, and it's kind of stuck with him in the league the first few years here. But I agree. I mean, he has got, I think, to tone it down just a little bit, curb that sort of that fire a little bit. But listen, I think statistically he's worth every bit of the money that he got signed for. What do you think?
But what president do you send?
Yeah.
What? How can you hold him accountable?
I agree with that.
For the bullshit. I mean, it's not just, like you said, you already mentioned the 15-yard penalties, personal fouls, stuff of that nature. You can't hold him accountable for that shit, in particular when he already, did what he did with Mason Rudolph and hit him over the head with his own helmet, which is the first time I've ever seen that on a football field in my entire life. You can't hold this man accountable to try to, I'm not going to say behave, but at least make smarter decisions on the football field when you reward him with a monster contract, with a 6-figure contract. What's the incentive? All right, well, I'm already getting paid, so I'm just going to keep doing the same shit anyway. That's the president. That's the message that you send.
Yeah.
And, that's the one issue that I have with this. It's not, dude, his first 3 years in the NFL, He's averaged 10 sacks per season. He's clearly a very productive edge rusher in the National Football League. Like that's undisputed, undoubted. But when you send that message and you reward someone that just potentially cost your entire franchise a chance to be able to get to the NFL postseason, how do you, what's the message that you send to Baker Mayfield, who you want to mature?
Yeah.
How do you send that message to Odell Beckham Jr., which by the way, I mean, like, again, I like Odell. Odell is a smart young man, but he also does some dumb shit. Like handing NFL or LSU players cash money with literally 360-degree coverage camera-wise around you.
Money stacks.
Exactly, dude. I mean, like, I'm just saying, what type of message does this get to the entire franchise that hasn't won predominantly for a very long time?
Yeah, listen, these are all great points, and I can't really, have a counter to it at all.
He's a great player. I mean,
in a situation like this, though, Derek, I mean, you can't, not try to lock up this type of player, though, right? I mean, that's the thing. This is where the line gets so fine, right? This is where, these type of situations are just.
Did they get him at a bargain?
Yeah, right, and it makes him so difficult to navigate because, again, he's so productive, and the team is trending upwards. So you want to at least send one message of, hey, we want you to anchor our defensive line. We want you to be a part of this winning culture. But again, at the same time, the guy's got issues. He's got on the field issues. So it just makes it such a difficult situation to navigate.
I'm not saying that I necessarily think that how they handled it was I personally would not have given him that contract. Just me personally. I'm not trying to. I get that his production on the field definitely warrants the contract. I mean, 100%. I'm just saying, man, when you're trying to change the culture of a franchise that has been a perennial loser for over a decade, that you really send a mixed message to the rest of the entire roster. When a guy that got suspended the final 6 games of a season now gets a 6-figure contract.
Yeah.
I mean, that is definitely problematic. But I mean, let's go ahead and change gears now. I mean, there were some other players that did actually get a long-term deal, and I've seen a couple graphics though. When it comes to your boy Derrick Henry, King Henry, crown that man. Yeah, he's actually getting paid less on a per year basis than David Johnson.
Yep.
But the Titans did go ahead and sign him to an extension. I think, I want to get your thoughts on it, but
sure.
I think that the Tennessee Titans got away with robbery here because Derrick Henry is the best early down sledgehammer physical running back in the National Football League. All respect to Zeke Elliott, but I tell you what, if you want to build your team through running the football, playing small ball, grinding the clock, Derrick Henry is the premier back in the National Football League as of today to play that style of football.
Yeah, agreed. And he did get robbed, but this goes back to it's so sad to me again, the devaluation of the running back in the National Football League. We're talking about a guy in Derrick Henry who is the NFL's leading rusher, coming off leading the league in rushing. I had the stats in my brain, but of course now that I'm trying to remember them, I forgot. But the Titans last year were something like, I want to say 9 or 10-0, including the playoffs when he rushed over 100 yards, and they were 0 forever when he didn't, including the playoffs. So you're talking about a guy that makes a difference for your team. Derrick Henry is the guy, and again, he came into the league as a guy that, he was only the thunder to the lightning in a running back duo, right? But this season has proved that he can be an all-purpose back. We actually saw him catching the ball out of the backfield a few times this season on a few screen passes. Of course, one memorable screen pass, of course, in that Baltimore Ravens playoff game, where he's trucking dudes on the way to the end zone, and he did that to a few guys on his way to, again, leading the league in rushing last year. But This is the devaluation of the running back, man. I mean, it's only 25.5 million guaranteed, 4 years, 50 million on the contract, and I'm happy that he did get the extension, but yeah, he was robbed.
So I'm going to quote Game of Thrones, and if you're looking for justice, you're in the wrong place. Because if we're looking at it as far as particularly just Derrick Henry and his value to his individual team, you can argue he's the most important back in the entire football league.
Agreed.
As far as his importance to his team's success. Derrick Henry, when it comes to, you mentioned that even though he doesn't catch a high volume of passes, when you get that monster in the open field and you have a convoy in front of him in the screen game, Derrick Henry is a nightmare to just ask Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas. Literally, Derrick Henry turned an all-pro safety into a blocker of his by spinning the man around and guiding him into oncoming traffic.
He wanted no part of Derrick Henry on that play.
We talked shit about him the earlier week. Like, we ain't afraid to go at Derrick Henry. Yeah, you are. Everybody is. Everybody is making business decisions when it comes to trying to tackle Derrick Henry. And I don't blame him. Like, I'm not talking shit. I like to mix it up when I was playing football.
Yeah, me too.
I want nothing to do with Derrick Henry.
No.
When he gets ahead of steam, he is a locomotive. But when it comes to Derrick Henry, man, I'm glad that he got the guaranteed dollars, because you know what? When it comes to the running back position, everybody is willing. Like Lev Bell. Lev Bell was one of the best overall weapons in the National Football League to that Pittsburgh Steelers offense, that Killer Bees set, and they still played hardball with him and franchised him 2 years in a row. So the fact that they signed Derrick Henry to a guaranteed deal, like, I'm happy for him. I'm happy for him, but I want to change pace yet again.
Okay.
To Dak Prescott, because Jerry Jones, has some great quotes out there. He says, like, deadlines make deals. This deadline came and went.
Yeah.
You've had September to try to work this shit out with Dak Prescott. And guess what? Dak is still playing his 2020 season on your books for $31.5 million. I want to get your thoughts. Does this sour the relationship between the Cowboys and Dak Prescott? Or do you think it's still something that the Jerry Jones and company can get it done?
Well, I haven't heard a lot from Prescott's camp on this, so I'm just speculating at this point. But I would imagine behind the scenes that he is seething. I would imagine that he's saying the right things in public. I think he came out quoted as saying earlier this week that he's happy to be a Cowboy and he's excited for the upcoming season, things of that nature, all of that old talk. But I would imagine behind the scenes, and this is to his credit, I would imagine he's seething because since Dak Prescott has come into the league, he has been one of the more productive quarterbacks in the entire league. And he has stabilized the position for your franchise. And he has pretty much made it a position that you don't really have to worry about if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. Again, this is Jerry Jones at his finest here, and I know we talked a bit about this last week, but I think a deal will get done. I don't know if it'll be this season. He's already signed the franchise tag, so technically they don't necessarily have to do anything from this point on. Of course, obviously the deadline is going to pass. That's another mark on that. But I just don't know if anything will get done this year. And it seems to me that Jerry Jones is just waiting for either him to get injured or have a subpar season for him to point at and just say, look, he's not worth what he wants.
So I'll change the question then. So because all the points you made are fantastic. It's just more so when it comes to Dak Prescott in particular, and Jerry Jones unwilling to really give him a monster pay. You've already gotten him at an incredible discount, given the fact that you drafted him in the 4th round, given the fact that he's played on a rookie contract for the past 3 seasons and been incredibly productive. So I'm going to ask you, though, if you're Jerry Jones, I mean, clearly, I think that he's sent a message that he doesn't fully believe in Dak Prescott as a franchise quarterback to pay him top dollar market value. So is he right in that assessment?
Well, if you're asking me, do I think Dak Prescott is a top quarterback? Numbers wise, I would say yes, right? Numbers wise, I would say yes.
Okay.
But I think, and maybe Jerry Jones shares a lot of this sentiment. I think Dak Prescott, he lacks a certain wow factor, if that makes any sense. He lacks a certain specific stardom that I think maybe Jerry Jones is looking for.
Bravado,
swagger, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I think again, I think that's what Jerry Jones is either seeing or not seeing when it comes to Dak Prescott. And again, numbers wise, you can put him up there with any quarterback in the league, and he's right there. But I think there's something Jerry Jones just isn't quite convinced about when it comes to Dak Prescott. And again, I think it's that certain star quality, maybe that certain eye-popping athleticism. I don't know what it could be.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that either. I mean, it's like, he had no problem paying Tony Romo like that.
Right.
I mean, and don't get me wrong. Look, I'm a Romo fan. I actually think that Romo was chronically underappreciated there in Big D. And as far as across the NFL landscape, Romo was very productive. It's just, unfortunately, Romo was not able to have success in the playoffs, and he's had trouble just living down the whole Seattle debacle where he, whatever. But the point being, when it comes to Dak Prescott, I mean, Dak, yes, his numbers on paper look good from last season. In particular, he finished second in the league in passing yardage, and that was with a couple, proverbial turds that he laid against. Yeah. No offense, against the New England Patriots, against the Green Bay Packers,
the Saints. I believe the Saints was in a good game.
Yeah, I mean, there were a handful of games where Dak Prescott, I like to think that he had pretty damn good options and weapons on the outside. I mean, granted, his defense, you can make whatever points you want to, but Dak certainly had a nice deck of options. I mean, and certainly he had his games where his numbers were through the roof and he was incredibly efficient and stuff of that nature. But, I mean,
that brings up a really good point, Tater. Do you think the lack of quote unquote winning big games has anything to do with it as well? Because you hit the nail on the head, right? That Buffalo game, that was a big game. That New Orleans Saints game, that was a big game. And there were other games throughout this past season that were, again, marquee big games that he underperformed in. So do you think that was a factor? It could be a factor as well. He kind of has a track record throughout his career of this.
It could be. It could be a factor where Jerry Jones is looking like, if you're that guy, if you are that quarterback, you could have gotten me one win like that all season. And when you take into consideration that this is the NFC East and the skeleton of the Philadelphia Eagles was able to string together enough wins behind Carson Wentz, and look at what Carson Wentz was going to towards the end of the season. I mean, you look at Carson Wentz did more with less than Dak Prescott did. You can make that case.
Yeah.
So when you put it in that perspective, yeah, man, I mean, Dak had his opportunities to really just take this division, run with it, at least get to the postseason, and it was set up on a silver platter, and he dropped the ball. I mean, there were games where he laid an egg. Sure, he looked great against weak-ass opponents, but there were games where he just didn't get it done. And I get that Zeke was less explosive than he was in his first couple seasons in the National Football League. And, Amari Cooper had games where he kind of disappeared on the road. But, dude, ultimately, when it comes to excuses, everybody can come up with excuses. And Dak is supposed to be that leader, that player that helps you overcome those regardless of what the circumstances are. And I think that there's a case to be made that Dak didn't do that in 2019.
Yeah, and again, I think that's probably maybe where a lot of this is coming from, his lack of ability to win big games. And we're not just talking about last year. He's got a bit of a track history of not winning games that he's, quote, supposed to win, could win, or or have a great opportunity to win. So maybe that's got a lot to do with it as well.
So we'll go ahead and finish up with some of the NFL safety protocols, because we're hoping that we're going to have a 2020 NFL season, knock on wood. But the NFL safety protocols have recently come out as far as a proposal. Nothing has been fully agreed upon yet. But, we're on the verge of the proposed date when NFL players are supposed to be reporting to training camp on July 28th. Some of the recent NFL safety protocols, if you want to add to these, but some of the ones that have been popularized and at least reported are for players to wear a face covering pretty much all the time. And then, of course, they can't leave hotel rooms to eat. I mean, those are just a couple of them. If you want to go ahead and sound off on some of the other ones and also give me your thoughts on, is the NFL just way behind the ball here right now?
So, they are behind the ball, but just a few, one more that I'm looking at here, mandate that team buses cannot be more than 50% full. So only half capacity on team buses, and there must be at least one open seat between passengers on buses and team planes. Of course, this is in line with social distancing, mandates and rules and all of that. Let's see. Everyone is going to get their own hotel room on the road.
That to me doesn't seem like enough.
Right. I mean, I agree. Let's see. Something else I'm looking at here. Okay, no use of public or private transportation. So everybody has to use team sanctioned traveling, and that's about it from what I'm looking at right now. If you want to go to, I believe it's on NFL.com. Let me see here. So if you want to go to NFL.com, it's there. And, again, the NFL is behind on this thing. I'm looking at some of these guidelines. This is published by Dan Graziano, who does a lot of good work for ESPN. But they're behind on this. And we're talking less than 2 weeks, till camp starts, Derek. And, we've got prominent NFL players tweeting within the past week about their lack of knowledge. And, these mandates just came down pretty much yesterday, the day before. But there are a lot of things that are still unknown. And you've got players from J.J. Watt to the aforementioned Russell Wilson, whose wife is pregnant right now. He tweeted out that he is concerned. He doesn't know what the protocols are. How does he manage, practicing with teammates during training camp and going home to his pregnant wife? These are things that need to be figured out. And the NFL is hilariously slow on this, man.
I mean, it's J.J. Watt is certainly one of the players that has sounded off via social media about some concerns that they have, and rightfully so. I mean, we've even seen the likes of Todd Gurley, Jarvis Landry, the aforementioned Myles Garrett, and even Drew Brees begin to kind of sound off about, like, what they want clarification and a clear plan. They want to play. I mean, J.J. Watt used the hashtag in his said tweet, that hashtag we want to play. But what are the parameters and the guidelines, the protocols? If you don't have the players buying in and feeling that they are safe reporting to a team and team facility, then you're going to have a lot of issues, moving forward with this 2020 NFL season. Yeah,
and you've got one prominent player, Demarcus Lawrence, saying that he doesn't necessarily know if he wants to report to camp.
Right.
And I'm sure he is not the only person that feels like that. And I'm going to bring this back to something we were talking about earlier in the show, Derek, about Roger Goodell being a hands-off commissioner here. I'm reading one tweet. This is from Michael Thomas, who got a 99, by the way, on the Madden ratings.
Well deserved, by the way.
Yes, he did. But Thomas tweeted, "If Adam Silver can respect the voices and protect his NBA players, why can't NFL Commission do the same? Listen to your players." I mean, this is
well said.
This is, what else can you say to that? This is once again an example of Roger Goodell not taking the time to actually listen to the people responsible for his job and the success of his league. And it's a bad look. It continues to be a bad look.
It's funny that you say time, because the NFL, of all the American professional sports organizations, has actually had the most time to be able to make these protocols, guidelines, stuff of that nature, like to ensure player safety, coach safety, game official safety, etc. All personnel involved in conducting these games. Roger Goodell has had the most time to be able to implement these protocols for an NFL season in 2020, and yet players are supposed to report in like 8 days, and yet we don't have answers. It just what? Like, where the hell is the disconnect?
Yeah. And if you think something is going to be put in place and be solid and be a good plan in a week, you're sadly mistaken. And again, this is why, as we sort of end things here on the go route, I want to get an update on on your feelings on if we have a season. If you could put a number on it, 1 to 10, where we're at right now, what are your thoughts on a possible season?
So if you're asking me if we're going to have a full 16-game season, I feel as if my confidence level on a scale of 1 to 10 is more around a 5. Like, I'm uncertain. Can you push it back a little bit? Can you postpone things? Potentially, yeah. But I still, as far do I feel like we're going to have NFL games this upcoming fall? I do. That's a 10. I still feel like they will be able to get a season in some shape or form. Okay. But a full 16-game season on time, that confidence level has dropped significantly down to like around a 5. I think it's a coin flip. But the NFL has had the opportunity and time to be able to put in protocols, and they haven't capitalized on that, nope. which is inexcusable. The fact that they are probably the most profitable, or one of the most profitable sports organizations, if not the most, across the entire globe, and yet endless resources, financially and otherwise, personnel-wise, they have not been able to take advantage of that.
Agreed.
So
I'm right with you. My confidence level dwindles within the week. I do think there will be games, hopefully a 12-game season, maybe 14 games, but a full 16-game season. Just I'm losing more and more confidence by the day.
And it breaks my heart as a fantasy football aficionado. I want to see. I mean, I just want to see football in general, and I know a lot of people across the country want to, for whatever various reasons, whether you're a fantasy football fan or not. But it's going to be interesting to see how this develops with the National Football League moving forward. As that'll do it for this episode of the Go Route here on Fantasy Focus, brought to you by the Original Hooters. Again, if this is your first time coming across our channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, whether you're listening via podcast or on our YouTube channel. Subscribe. Also click the little bell so you get notifications whenever we drop fantasy football or other content here on the Fantasy Focus channel. So that'll do it for my take, but Jay, sign us off.
All right, folks. And again, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Go Route. We will see you again next week. I am Jay Fife, and I'm telling you to live your best life.